All right, students, in this video, I'm going to be covering an odd punch, but a super effective one called the overhand punch. Now, you've been training for a while here if you're watching this video, and you know that most of our punches are straight or they're hooked close to the body. I have been teaching you since day one not to swing wild, wide punches. Well, today, now that you know the rules, we're going to break them just a little bit, okay? Let's talk first about striking surface. When I strike with any kind of a punch, I really want to focus on using these two big knuckles. Whether it's a back fist, hitting the back of those two knuckles, a straight punch, hitting the front of those two knuckles, a hook punch, again, using the front of those two knuckles, okay? We've talked about from day one, making sure that you're using the proper striking surface. That doesn't change with this punch. What does change is the angle of our punch. Now, this is an advanced technique because there's the possibility for injury as we try to execute this punch. So I want you to be really careful when you practice this. Go super slow at first, make sure your body alignment is correct before you start throwing it with power on a target. Okay, let's talk about why this is called an overhand punch. So if I'm here, I could throw a reverse punch, boom, or a cross with this hand. I could throw a jab, right? I could throw a hook or an uppercut with either hand. All of those start at the shoulder level or below. This particular punch actually goes up above the shoulder level and then comes down and across. Now you're looking at me, I'm sure, saying, wait a second, that looks like a crazy man punch or a haymaker. Rah! Well, it's not. Here's why. First of all, a haymaker punch or a crazy man punch tends to hit almost with these front knuckles, and it's just kind of slapping across and around. It's very powerful because it's got a lot of momentum behind it. What we're doing is we're stealing the momentum from that and putting it into a very well directed, accurate punch. So instead of swinging our arm out wide and then pulling in using our chest muscle here, what we're actually doing is lifting our elbow up, and then just like every other strike, the elbow is following the knuckles into our strike. So as this comes up, I'm moving my body to one side. I'm pivoting off of the striking side leg. Now this can be thrown from the lead hand or it can be thrown from the rear hand. We're going to practice it mostly from the rear hand. You'll get to use it from the lead hand eventually, but we're going to practice it mostly from the rear foot. So if I've got my right foot back and my right hand up here, I'm going to lift my elbow. I'm going to move my head toward my left side. This hand goes up and over. Now watch the thumb. Instead of striking with the thumb horizontal or vertical, I'm actually going to turn it down on about a 45-degree angle, depending on my target. I might even rotate it down to a 90-degree angle pointing toward the floor, depending on what I'm trying to strike. I never want to rotate past that 90 degrees, all right? That puts my wrist and my elbow and my shoulder all in a very bad position. So the elbow comes up, the head moves, I pivot on the back leg, the elbow lifts above the fist. From here, the fist comes in and downward into my opponent. This is called an overhand punch because it goes up and over. Now, one of the great times to use this is when somebody is throwing a jab. You can slip to the side and throw that punch over their arm so that their punch goes past your head and you strike over the top of it. Lots of KOs with this one in multiple striking sports. Let me show you how this works on Mr. Bob. So here I am. I've got my hands up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this elbow as I move to this side, okay? Now, I probably don't want to lead in with this strike. I may want to throw a jab or throw some sort of a kick or something to kind of throw him off before I throw this one because it is a little bit slower. It's not as fast of a punch as a jab is, okay? It's got lots more distance to cover. So what I'm doing is I'm lifting the elbow, moving my head offline, pushing with the hip and the back foot, rotating up and over and striking downward. Now, you see that I'm hitting with the back of my knuckles, about here, similar to a back fist. I'm also pointing my thumb slightly down, but you see that my elbow is still in line with my wrist. I don't want to be down here or up here. My elbow is still in line with my wrist so that I can drive into and through the target. Now, your strike is going to be both rotational and forward with this. We don't want to just go across. We want to go across and forward. So we're pushing off of that back foot to give us some extra reach as we drive down into the target. Now, you can throw this to the body, okay? but most of the time that's going to be for people who are a lot taller than you. So if your opponent happens to be a lot taller than you, you can throw this down to the body. Think about it this way though, his neck is pretty flexible. His spine down below his neck, not so much. Okay, so if I want to use my wrist in a weird angle to hit something, probably the body is not going to be the safest place for my wrist. Instead, hitting up to the head gives me a little bit more flexibility because his neck is more flexible. Okay, so there's less likelihood of damage to my fist. Okay, let's talk about angles for this for just a second. The beauty of this punch is that it can come from a number of different angles. I can make this really wide and high. I can make it relatively low and close. I can come up with it and rotate it over. I can come high with it and rotate it down. I can have my body in a number of different positions to strike with this. I might even be almost completely bladed when I throw this strike and come down and in. In fact, you'll see something called the horseshoe punch, and you'll learn that later on, okay? Which is a cool strike which uses a version of this overhand punch. So note that there's a lot of different angles you can throw this from. Maybe focus on one or two that work well for your body. We're going to teach it off the rear hand, coming up and over, striking downward into the jaw or into the temple here. Be careful that you don't leave your shoulder behind and throw your body forward. That puts my elbow in a locked position. It lengthens the ligaments here in my shoulder, puts them at risk, and you see the position of my wrist is not great. I want to keep this closer to my body so that everything stays well aligned. I'm coming up, over, pushing forward with the hip, with the knee, with the foot, through the target. My angle of attack is down and through the target, not straight back, not up, but down and through. All right? Make sure you're breathing as you throw the strike. All right? Keep your core nice and tight. Keep your head over your shoulders. A tendency here is to let our head roll as we do this. We want to slip, but we want to keep our head in line with our body, not off to the side where we're in danger, okay? So keep it in line and make sure your other hand is staying in a guarding position over your body, whether you're doing here, whether you're throwing over that lead arm, okay? Whatever it is, the other hand should still be guarding that center line. All right, guys, be careful practicing with this one, especially if you have shoulder injuries from your past training. You want to make sure you protect those shoulders. Don't throw this with super amounts of power until you get very, very used to it. All right, guys, I hope you enjoy this one. It's a little bit unique, a little bit fun, something you can throw in kickboxing. Keep training, keep growing, and we'll see you in the next video.